honestly, what goes better together than pizza and reality TV? This month's episode of Brand New World was largely created during Fast Company's Innovation Festival, which was held in New York City in mid-September. It's always a hectic time with so many amazing panels, interviews, and sessions to get to, scattered within exciting companies around the city and on our main stages. I bounced around to an eclectic handful of stage interviews that went from talking to Haley Steinfeld about her new canned tequila cocktail brand, Angel Margarita, to chatting about the future of experiential marketing with the wizards at Moment Factory, Woven, and Dion, and talking with Oscar Mayer and its agency, Johannes Leonardo, about racing Wienermobiles at the Indy 500. So yeah, a cornucopia of brand flavors, a feast for the brand strategy senses. For today's episode, I decided to mix it up between a one-on-one chat I had in a podcast pod at the festival with Tom Gozney, founder of pizza oven brand Gozney, and a main stage chat with Bozoma Saint-John about her new advertising-based reality show with Jimmy Fallon called On Brand. This is what I love about this job. On one hand, being able to talk to a fascinating startup founder in the world of pizza, and on the other, chat with a former CMO of Netflix and Uber and a star of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, who's now leading a network reality show that's making real ad work for real brands. Okay, grab a slice and the remote. I'm Jeff Beer, and this is Brand New World. I first heard of Gozney through a pizza-obsessed old pal of mine back in Toronto. Shout out to Brian Corcoran, who not only was extolling the virtues of the company's Rockbox outdoor pizza oven, but also the style of their design and the way the founder Tom Gozney was building such an impressive roster of brand ambassadors. Founded in 2010 as the Stone Bake Oven Company, Gozney began producing custom-built commercial pizza ovens for the UK market. But in 2016, with the launch of the Rockbox oven, Gozney shifted its focus to everyday people. The company has grown from $25 million in revenue in 2021 to nearly $100 million last year. It's a founder-led brand in that its story is directly tied to Gozney's personal journey through recovery. I've written about the brand in Fast Company before, back in 2023, as well as when they launched a Matty Matheson edition oven in June. I've had a Zoom with Tom before, but most of what I've seen of him was on the brand's YouTube channel, cooking with Matty, interviewing pizza chefs, even camping in Iceland to test how tough their portable tread oven was. The fun of having this podcast is sometimes I can just fan out on brands that I admire and personally use. I legit love Gozney's designs, how it partners with people like Brad Leone, Matty, and Candace Brown, and its YouTube series, Pizza with Frank Pinello. So I was excited to sit down with Tom in person to try to dig into how he thinks about content and design as pillars of the brand's success, how he's working to maintain the brand's culture amid international expansion, and more. And yes, I definitely grilled him for pizza dough tips after we turned off the mics. We talked a lot about brand entertainment in various ways, mostly on like very high level. I've talked to WhatsApp about their Netflix doc, The Seat, which was a Mercedes F1, the process of replacing Lewis Hamilton when he left. That whole team communicated on WhatsApp. So it was a natural sort of thing for WhatsApp to be involved in. That's a pretty high level thing. The next one was like talk to the CFO of Expensify, who's got involved there on Brad Pitt's chest in the entire F1 movie as like a major sponsor of a fictional F1 team. And it's huge investment, but also just like the value of entertainment, investing in entertainment for their brand. But what I think about examples like that, there's also so many amazing examples of smaller scale brands that aren't owned by Meta, on that level, or financial fintech brands like that see that and can use content / entertainment to build their brand. And I feel like Gozney is a huge success story in that respect for a few reasons. Like you guys use it for entertainment with series like Pizza with Frank, which I went to Best Pizza the other night for the first time. Loved it.
Was Frank there?
No.
Oh, he's in Italy.
Yeah, it was just a full normie experience. It was great.
Yeah,
loved it. Pizza with Frank, but then there's so much, obviously, when it comes to pizza ovens and whatnot, like instructional, whether that's dough, whether that's actually using the ovens for different things, like educating people about your intent with the product. So all that being said, I just kind of wanted to start by asking, like, What role does content play in your overall brand strategy? And you've gone from, I think you guys have over 100 million views on YouTube on your overall content. The company has grown from 25 million in 2021 to nearly 100 million in 2024. You can update that if you want. So the company's grown. So I'm interested in, that role that content is playing and has played, and this sort of how that's evolved.
Yeah, it really has been an evolution. So really early on in our journey, when I think we were probably, I don't know, I want to say like in 2016 when we launched Rockbox, we were probably 2 or 3 million in revenue. We were tiny. And I remember everyone in the office thinking I was absolutely crazy because I wanted to spend $50,000 on media equipment, cameras, studio, and actually to start building a bit of a media engine for the business.
What made you want to do that? Was there an inspiration, or you just see other...
No, it wasn't. It was just like, do you know what? These ovens are so versatile. They're so amazing. Like, I want to really lean into selling the lifestyle, because I guess one of the things that I discovered when I discovered pizza ovens, I didn't know anything about them. And back when we started, it was actually quite rare in England at that time to even see a pizza oven in a restaurant. It wasn't that normal. Okay. And so there was a huge educational piece that we needed to deliver to share the versatility of ovens, how you could use them, how amazing they were at cooking pizza. So I think that's where the idea was generated, to create an in-house studio and build out recipe content, build out educational content around tips and tricks and techniques and things like that. So I think it started on the basis that, like, if we can just educate people in how these products can add value to their lives, like, that's the initial win. And I guess the evolution of our content has been crazy. It's been a really fun journey. But then I think probably around 2021, I just had a vision. I saw, well, firstly, we were getting immersed in the world of ambassadors and people like Frank Pinello and Matty and people like that. I'd started to get to know those guys. They loved our product. I just loved what Vice had done with Munchies and with the show with Frank and all of that stuff. And then obviously that came to an end, with where those guys were, that was their outlet, right? For building their content and distributing their content. And so I thought it would be really interesting to actually build almost like a media arm of Gozney. And it became a core pillar of our brand. I remember 5 years ago when we sat in our room with the senior leadership team, we basically said, like, what are the 4 core pillars that we're going to build out here? And it was essentially hardware, all the ovens that we were making. We were then going to lean into consumables as well. So moving into like dough and things like that was a core pillar for us as well. Founder story. So my story about how I went through adversity and grew on the journey, and media was a key pillar in our journey. And I kind of feel like, in the early days, it was a proper evolutionary journey, but like we went from making media where we're just like promoting the ovens, right? And it's like, it does this.
Well, it's also early on in the culture of, like, it's not like, oh, let's start a skateboard brand, or where what a skateboard is and how to use it is known. You're just pitching in that respect, or a new soda or whatever. It's like you're pitching why someone should use yours over another, or why yours is better, or a building on existing technology. Whereas this was, and just like your company started with commercial ovens, the whole idea of pizza ovens at home was incredibly niche. It was really niche.
Yeah, it was really niche at the time. And I guess I went on that journey to discover like how I wanted to build brand. And what essentially put me off after a little while in the way that we were shooting our content in the early days, it was almost like it was so sales orientated, and I kind of felt like
your version of an infomercial.
Yeah,
almost.
It was like a premium infomercial, and it was like, you can cook this and it does this, and it's like, and I'm just like, this doesn't interest me personally, and I'm like, I want to learn about the roots and how like subculture and community is built through pizza, because I actually think talking about how pizza has transformed how people sit around a table together, or they make together and they create together, was much more interesting to me. I met Matty, I met Frank Pinello, and lots of others, and their stories were fascinating to me. They had these incredible growth journeys through food, but also it was so poignant for me, the journey that food had taken me on from a community perspective, coming out of, I came out of rehabilitation when I was 21, and I was in desperate search for community. The business was born through my hunt for finding people to sit around a table with me, and I didn't know it was a table at that time. I just knew it wasn't a club. doing drugs and drinking
Right.
the previous. And so the table became my club, man. That was where I built community. It's where I found like love and unity and all of those things. And I just love feeding people. And that's the incredible journey that food has taken me on, which is like, I don't even really view us today. We build pizza ovens, we design pizza ovens, and we're soon to be designing products that sit outside of pizza ovens as well in new cooking verticals. That was never what the brand was. It was born through this desire to find purpose and find community. And I guess like that was so intrinsically rooted in like my DNA of like why the brand was built. And I was just like, we have to go and tell those stories. Like that was what was really interesting to media about me. And people are like, well, you're fucking nuts. It's like, why are we going to go and shoot content that doesn't have necessarily even have our products in it? I'm like, I don't want our products in it. This is about telling stories. If the products feature, that's cool, but they're not at the forefront of this content. And it was about connecting people to something that was greater than what our brand, what our products were. Right. It was about what the brand was rooted in, essentially. And that's a journey that we went on with that sort of like storytelling, entertainment style.
Yeah, and it also seems like there are tiers. Because like you say, there's still the need for educational stuff, and at the same time, that's still like valuable content of like, if you're gonna invest in a pizza oven, you're gonna maybe have the written instructions how to do it. Anyone who's messed around with dough knows that like what it says on the page can sometimes not be what happens in front of you. So video is also incredibly helpful.
It really is, yeah.
Hearing somebody's story of frustrations and ups and downs with any of the process, and you guys educating about cooking things that aren't pizza in the ovens as well. Like,
I was also inspired and fascinated in the way that Yeti built out storytelling as part of
like Yeti Presents, their film series.
It was beautiful, right? And it almost became a cult following in its own right. And that really inspired me from that perspective on how they built brand. And so there was this like cascading funnel of content that I felt. And like if you're a pizza oven brand and someone isn't like necessarily into buying a pizza oven, or they feel, and you're being overly salesy around the hardware, they're not going to watch your content. And I just figured if we could pull people into the top of the funnel, like top of the funnel content that was like more storytelling, more, lifestyle orientated, like make it entertaining, you can actually get people to watch this, and it cascades down into that. And I guess that's the sort of like hidden gem in what we were doing, right? It was like pulling people in to feel a sense of this community and how other people have pizza change their lives and the value that it added to their lives. And then it sort of pulls them into the Gozney ecosystem, and then they start to, and so I guess the overarching view is that someone that isn't necessarily in the funnel to buy a pizza oven, we can get them in the funnel and they're not put off because it's like hardware marketing.
But that's interesting because I think a lot of, particularly in your category, it starts with the hardware. People can geek out. Gearheads can geek out on the hardware, but if you're not coming in for that, it's kind of, to your point, the invite into the tent is way much narrower, much smaller than if you're like, there's an emotional story, or there's like a travel adventure aspect to it, or there's something, or there's you're going to somewhere outside London to see this. Oh, that looks like a pretty sick, like, I'm trying to think, I can't remember the guy's name, but there's like that little pizza shop outside London, maybe an hour
Tom
outside
Vincenzo.
London. Yeah. Exactly. That's a great one. For anyone listening, go check that one out.
And also, like if you're American, he is so unbelievably British, that guy.
Yeah,
he's and charismatic.
Juxtaposing that with pizza, like a quintessentially kind of American,
totally
food. His approach is so out there and awesome but like you may just stumble upon something like that, like someone would watch No Reservations or something like that.
100%.
And all of a sudden, by the end of it, you're like, hey, I don't know, this feels like it's meditative or something. Maybe I'll try this out. I feel like that's a much broader way to bring people in. Has that been the experience? Like, this is your not theory, but this is your approach you wanted. How has that played out in kind of results?
Yeah, I think it really has played out. I mean, if, like, people love that content, right? And actually, like, we've just had absolute knockout feedback from our community, but our social channels have grown. It's been out of control, really, since we boosted our YouTube. I think, or started deploying in our YouTube.
Right,
I think,
okay.
I think we were like we have the biggest YouTube channel in outdoor cooking, in the space, and we're bigger than other really prominent brands. And so we really lent into it. And I think it all boils down to, man, it was just like, this is a community-based business. It's like almost like pizza's become a subculture. And I think, it feels kind of like how skate was. And it's just like, you look at Tom at Vincenzo's, right? That people are like crazy obsessed with this lifestyle of like making pizza and obsessing about dough. It's like, it was the journey that I went on when I built my first oven, made my first pizza. I became obsessed with perfecting my dough.
Yeah.
I still now don't feel I've ever made the dough that I want to make. And it's like, I'm on a 120-hour ferment and I geek out. And I'm like, it's a journey. So learning from all the different people, but also, man, it's a source of inspiration for how people want to live, like how they can have different hobbies in their lives. Right. And that was what was important. I think I sort of stumbled across magic, and that's how the brand was built when I built my first oven. And it just so happens now that it's becoming really fucking cool, to be in pizza. And so, so it's exciting.
Whenever, to me, a brand's doing so much right, it always looks from the outside like, totally natural. Obviously, they made these decisions. This is of course, this is what this is. The road is wide and obvious here because it's so clear. But obviously, that's not the case. How do you guys have grown? You built your first oven. You started selling commercial ovens, Rockbox. Then you kind of grew, taking on investors, I believe, and so you've got a board. You become more corporate in your own way, but like what have been for you, again, as being one of the pillars yourself, as a founder-led brand, what have been some of the more significant challenges? And whether that's just simply growing the market, growing the company, or just yourself seeing your baby become, it's bigger than you and 5 folks that it started with. How is the growth, keeping the culture? What has been your biggest challenges that you sort of think about most?
Man.
I'm sure there's a laundry list.
So there's a list. And, I always find it fascinating when people from the outside, they're just like, you guys are fucking crushing it, bro. Like how you're building your marketing, your brand, like, product design, all of that stuff. And, it's like peddling like crazy below the surface, right? But I guess the biggest challenge is, I kind of think about it like this, like every phase of the evolution of our brand, we've grown and we've jumped up a couple of rungs of the ladder. And I suppose like when you climb a few rungs of the ladder, the infrastructure that you had 3 rungs ago isn't necessarily the same. Okay. And so I think there's always been professionalizing the business and making it bigger. And then as we've become much larger, how do we not become corporate? And how do we keep the hip hop on in the office and like do all the stuff that's important to me? So I think that has been interesting. I think growing significantly in the US and like building out a US office here, like the communication between UK and US, and just like time zone difference has had an impact on everyone. Like we have an org structure where we have one global team. And so we have people in the UK reporting into people in the US. And that's been a strain, man. Like I'm not gonna lie, like we have a fast growing brand, people are working their socks off. And it just puts strain on people's bandwidth, right? To deal with that like intercontinental, time difference. Yeah. But I guess one of the things that I'm probably really proud of, which I think I've done well at Gozney, is pizza ovens have become a thing. They went from niche and they've become mainstream, and we were part of the journey of building that. I'm not going to say we're the only people that have done that. There are other competitive brands that have been part of that journey. And I guess the one thing, it's really easy for a brand to get transfixed on just chasing revenue and going after it and like widening your distribution and building. But I guess like I took so much inspiration in the early days from how Steve Jobs approached product design at Apple and how he was just like, I guess, unapologetic in protecting his vision and all of those things. And so I really love the fact that, at Gozney, I really feel like we have built a hyper authentic community. We're really building a brand. And I don't, I want the business to become big and be really successful. And we are on that journey now. But I guess like, I'm probably proud of the things that I've said no to on the journey, like not necessarily always chasing growth. It's actually like, how do we recenter ourselves? understand what our values are, and understand like how we maintain those values and how we design products, how we represent the brand, what distribution partners we say no to as well as saying yes to. I think those have been the really interesting nuanced things on the journey that have been hard. In the early days, like understanding whether we should be in wholesale or whether we should remain D2C, like those journeys and that core tension of like, how do we grow this business in an ever evolving landscape where business is changing so frequently and how consumers are purchasing is changing.
Yeah.
You know, that was always like, I'm not going to say a bone of contention, but it was always a challenge to try and navigate. And I guess at the heart of me, I am obsessed with our brand. I'm just obsessed with our brand and everything that our brand stands for, which is our products, how we communicate to consumers, how we build out our media. Part of my role as the founder has just been like fiercely protecting that vision. I guess that is interesting when you grow and when you bring new leadership into the company and everyone's got great experience and they're smarter than me. And it's like fucking having the bollocks to say, no, this is the way we're going to fucking do it.
I was going to say, it sounds easy, or it's always a good answer when someone's like, I think the most important thing is the ability to say no. I hear that. Yeah, you hear that. But in the moment when you have these choices to make, it's got to be kind of difficult.
It's super, mate. I've said yes.
Say no to things that are like
yes to far too many things.
Right.
You know?
right.
And this isn't me saying like I've knocked it out of the park with saying no, but I guess that's like my biggest learning around understanding the core values of why you exist and then living and breathing those core values. And I think in the way that we design products and we think about innovation, I think that is like, that courses through my DNA.
Yeah.
I've got like very, very strict values around what our products should do, what they should bring to a consumer, how it should change a consumer's life. And like, those are things that are really, really close to me and that I've got firm grip on.
Well, I'll jump to that. I had this later in my line of questioning, but I'll jump to that and come back to some other stuff. Design in your category. So I wrote a story about the pizza oven market and I segment that maybe crudely, but still like tried to segment the pizza oven market into like, here are the brand personalities of, and for Gozney, you guys have always been, and obviously there's product differences and performance differences, but let's just even say for the sake of argument, mostly generally equal. What sets you guys apart is your design-led approach to your products. Like even if all the ovens were the same, and this is just a lot of similarities with automotive or, you know, sneakers, and it's like, it's how this thing look, make me feel.
100%.
And you talking about Steve Jobs and the commitment to design-led and that question of how that makes you feel. How did that start and how have you maintained that commitment? Because, you know, I'd be remiss to not point out that you just came out with a Gen 2 dome oven that looks fucking fantastic, by the way. It's really cool looking. And even if you didn't know it was a pizza oven, someone would be like, ooh, what's that in your backyard? That thing looks sick. How was that at the beginning? And yeah, how have you been able to maintain that? Because it is you must see this as like a key brand differentiator because it just looks, it's so obviously different than most things out there.
Yeah, like you said so many things in there that like were on the money for like things that I would say, you know, like the thing that I loved you saying then was your friend sees it in your garden and they're like, wow, what is that? And like one of the things I wrote down in the very beginning was like, I wanted someone to walk in and say, what the fuck is that thing? I want it before knowing what it was. And
right.
and like that was, but let me be a bit more sort of like articulate and sophisticated in how I answer that. I guess like in the early days, we designed commercial ovens for restaurants and we had these big, really interesting, like when you're a British-led brand and you're selling into restaurants, but you've got chefs from Naples in the restaurants in England, they're just like, they don't want to buy from an English guy, you know, like it's a very
like, I'm Canadian, I'm not going to buy British hockey skates.
100%. That's 100%.
Or at least in my mind.
And so we had to work hard. We had to work really, really hard to convince people that our ovens were brilliant, that they could stand up against Neapolitan ovens, which were predominantly where they were all from. But my view was we need to make them better. We need to make them function better. We need to make them out of more sustainable materials. They need to be like have better heat retention. So I just wanted to make the best product that I could possibly make because I was a green young guy going out into the world trying to make it and trying to make a name for myself in the commercial oven space. And I guess like going on that journey and working with chefs and essentially winning them all over, which is what we did, and we became the market leader in the UK. I learned a huge amount around the engineering, and like that's where I really got my education, working with incredible chefs that were teaching me how they've used ovens for third, fourth, fifth generation in their family. And so like that was where my education came from around product. And I guess we were in the commercial oven space. We did really, really well in that space, but then I saw an opportunity for us to move into selling products that had more scale that we could get. And I guess my overarching goal and vision was that I wanted to share this incredible journey of cooking with fire and the social interaction that the products create with more people. It wasn't just about pizza and it wasn't just about hardware. It was about community and love.
That feeling you had when you built your first backyard oven.
100%.
But then, you want to spread that feeling, but not everyone's going to spend the months and building that back. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a common hobby thing, but it was a thing where you knew people did build backyard pizza ovens, but it was like one of those things where you're like, wow.
Yeah.
That's heavy. Like I'm not gonna do that. I'd definitely go over there for a party. But how do you scale that? And that seems to be your
So I'll explain like with our product design. So one of the first products that we actually got scale with was Rockbox, was the tiny little silicon bodied one. And I had a really interesting story about Rockbox, but we'd spent 2 or 3 years, nearly 3 years developing it from a prototype perspective and making it function. And the core idea, I'm obsessed with design, I'm obsessed with engineering, I'm obsessed with quality. Those are the three things. Well, I would say quality and performance sit in the same bucket for me. It's design-led, performance and quality, and like sort of intuitive, easy use for a consumer that's never made a pizza before, that they can use this, it can perform highly, but they can have great success. So they don't need to be a third generation Neapolitan trained pizza chef to make the thing bloody work. And like that was the goal, right? And we basically went on this journey, and we designed Rockbox the first time we ever designed. I don't think I've ever actually shared this with anyone, but
go on.
But we designed this product that I've got early renders and pictures of it, and it was this like very commercial stainless steel bodied thing, had perforation all over it, and there was just like, I was learning about brand and learning about marketing and like on this journey of growing. I'd never really got an education, so it just didn't sit right with me. We were like a day away from pushing the button on the tooling, spend 100 grand on the tooling to make it. We got all the factories that had done months of work going through our drawings and basically getting set up for our tooling and all of that stuff. And I couldn't sleep. And one morning I came downstairs and I put on an Apple a documentary that was about Apple and about Steve Jobs.
Okay.
Again, he came into my life again at a poignant point. And it was about when he was opening his first ever Apple store. The layout of the store wasn't correct. He had people queuing around the block to go into it, and he delayed the opening of the store, was the story that I remember getting told. I can't remember what program it was on. And it was like, it wasn't good enough for him. And like, that was a moment for me where the penny dropped and I'm like, this isn't the right design. And I guess this is my like initial connection to being a designer. But I pulled the plug on that product. I redesigned it within a month. And then it went from being this very commercial stainless steel product to having the sort of curved silicon bum and the jacket on the outside. And I guess like the key thing that I discovered on that journey, and I'll get to actually our core design now as it's evolved on from Rockbox, was it was a product that got to 900 degrees, right? So, and it had a live flame. It was intimidating. And I was just like, if we build this commercial grade product, chefs are probably going to buy it and we're probably going to sell it to a few people, but it's not going to get the mass adoption that we need it to get.
Right.
And so when Rockbox was reinvented or designed for the first time, same internal engineering, but we put a silicon jacket on it and we curved its bum, and I kind of just said, this needs to feel like a little personality in the garden. It's got to be unintimidating. It's got to be, it's got to feel approachable, friendly, and like it's a little member of the family. And that was the design intent for Rockbox. And it was this notion that we could get people to not be scared of a live fire at 900 degrees and it cooks a pizza in 60 seconds when the world wasn't ready for that or didn't know that. And so the first time we designed Rockbox, it was about being approachable, fun, friendly, and unintimidating, right? And so we launched it and we had incredible success with Rockbox. But then I guess from my commercial roots and the things that I've told you I'm really passionate about, which are essentially, design is my obsession, quality and performance is a second obsession, and then allowing consumers to have brilliant experiences with our products is the third. And I kind of went on that journey after Rockbox, and I kind of we launched Rockbox, and I knew I knew it was the aesthetic that I didn't want to move forwards with, because I knew I needed to visually communicate with a consumer through our products that we stood for something different. And I wanted to represent our commercial heritage through the idea of our products. And the big unlock for me was like, how fucking unbelievably cool is it going into a restaurant, a pizza restaurant, and seeing this big beast of an oven in the corner with the cast iron brows and this gnarly looking monster with a roaring fire going in it. And I'm like, wouldn't it be fucking cool if that and Apple could have a baby and it was Gozney? And I'm like, that was like the idea. And it was like, that was the magic. And I was like,
that's dome. To me, that's what you're talking about is the dome.
That's where the dome was born.
Yeah.
It was like, take that gnarly, industrial, fucking cool, like commercial grade pizza oven, and like marry that with something tech focused, progressive, that felt intuitive. And so there were so many elements of the design that was so unbelievably intentional. The design is like modern, but it's like rooted in the heritage of where the ovens came from. So it's like a Neapolitan oven, right? It you know, the first ever dome had a little kindling rack
the little
in the
storage,
front. And it was kind of like tech. It was, I love to design in dichotomy. So it was like this sort of like dichotomy of merging tech and nature. So there was this uncontrolled wooden element in the front of it, which had connotations of like sensory aspects, breaking away from the constraints of life, losing yourself in the outdoors, but actually it's a pizza oven, right? So it was
it's also functional. You can use it to cook your food. Yeah,
exactly. And so there was this just like unbelievably deliberate vision I had to merge these dichotomies. It was like ancient and new, tech and nature. It needed to feel masculine and cool like the restaurant ovens, but I also wanted it approachable. I wanted it to be like a unisex product.
Yeah.
Like outdoor cooking is predominantly a male populated
barbecue, all that stuff.
And you know, you didn't really see too many wives like running out and being the person to go and buy the grill, you know, like, and I really,
at least even the stereotype is the stereotype for a reason.
Like dad flipping burgers, cooking sausages. That's the stereotype. And so a key part of like my design journey when doing that, I'm like, look, we can win here. If we can make this unbelievably cool, but we can make it beautiful enough so when the dad or the guy wants to buy it, the wife's like, yeah, let's go for that one. You know, and like that was almost like the design intent, that I wanted to make it something that was an architectural statement that elevated the garden rather than like just keen to put the cover over it as soon as you use.
Right.
Yeah. And that's actually morphed now into 40% of our audience, our customers being female. So it's crazy stat. And actually something that, from a designer's perspective, from my perspective, that's something that I'm the most proud of, because I'm just like, I want to create a movement around cooking. It's not even necessarily about the hardware or the food that comes out of it. It's creating a new experience for consumers that are so glued to their iPhones, that are so stuck in a tech and digital world. I want to create those moments again in the garden where people come together, they connect and they like enjoy each other. So everything that we've done at Gozney now is like delivered that vision of like those dichotomies in design, products that are simple yet sophisticated, you know, approachable yet professional. You know, it's just a mixture of dichotomies that are the ingredients of how Gozney's become Gozney.
Time for a quick break. When we come back, I'll be on stage at the Fast Company Innovation Festival with Bozoma Saint-John. Okay, for this month's edition of the CMO Sit Down, I was scheduled to be on stage with both Boz Saint-John and Jimmy Fallon to talk about their new NBC show, On Brand, set to launch on September 30th. However, it was the night before our interview that ABC decided to suspend Jimmy Kimmel indefinitely under threat from the FCC, and President Trump himself had called Fallon out to be next on the chopping block. We live in weird times. Needless to say, Jimmy had some stuff to deal with that morning, but Boz was game and ready to talk, and it was a blast. Thank you for being here. Thanks for coming to the festival. Thanks for being here this morning. So, in light of current events, Jimmy could not make it this morning, but...
So you got me.
Yes. Very Very happy and grateful to have Bozoma here. So I've been covering marketing advertising for years, and does anyone here work in marketing advertising? Okay, amazing. So you'll know what I'm saying. Every time I talk to someone, could be a copywriter, could be a chief creative officer, they tell this story about working in advertising, and whenever they're at a wedding or they're on a plane and they're kind of stuck talking to somebody and the topic of like, oh, what do you do? Comes up and they say advertising. Then they get basically whoever they're talking to telling them how good either they would be in advertising or what's wrong with all the advertising in the world.
Yes.
So
personal experience also.
It's something that probably doesn't happen to engineers and accountants and stuff, but so that discipline of advertising is such a thing where people kind of either are complaining about it or think they could do it. So, Boz, you and Jimmy have this show On Brand, which launches on NBC on September 30th.
Yes, yay.
And it is a perfect, to me, it's just the concept alone is like, this is that conversation essentially put to the test.
Yeah.
Real brands. I mean, there's KitchenAid, Marshalls, Pillsbury, Samsung, Sonic, Dunkin, Southwest, Captain Morgan, and Therabody all involved here. So, and
sounds like a regular Tuesday in the advertising world.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, if you're lucky. I want to rewind because it feels like when I saw this, it was like this is like an obviously fun idea.
Yeah.
How for you? How did this opportunity come about? How did the idea come about for the show?
Well, Jimmy had concepted the idea and sold it probably a year before we had a conversation.
Okay.
And I think the challenge that he was facing was that, of course, he's a genius at what he does every day, commenting about pop culture and making all kinds of, creative partnerships and that type of thing. But what he would say is that he doesn't have the resume, the chops, the professional corporate chops to back it up. And so he needed a partner to add legitimacy to the show. And then he saw me on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
All right.
And his wife said, what about Boz? And he was like, I don't know if a housewife is what I'm looking for.
For that legitimacy.
Exactly, for the legitimacy part. But of course, after we got on a call together and we talked about the idea and what it could mean and how much I love the concept, and not just that, it's like your example in the beginning where it's like, look, every time I've been at a cocktail party or on a plane or in an elevator where somebody knows what I do for a living, they always have an idea for me, always. I'm being pitched constantly. It's like when I was at Netflix, it's like, okay, look, somebody has a movie idea for sure, or how to advertise for some film. Or when I was at Apple, people had ideas about how to talk about Apple Music or, what artists to work with. And so that to me is like my lived experience. And so I told him that the concept of marrying those two things, advertising and marketing as an entertainment platform, which can engage an audience. I was like, shoot, you better sign me up. Otherwise, I'm just coming to set anyway. Yeah. Like I'm showing up regardless. So
well, you have a bit of a connection with Jimmy on that same level. We were just talking backstage when you were talking about. Well, maybe you tell them what you told me about Apple Music.
The Apple Music.
And how that made you.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so. When we launched Apple Music now 10 years ago, which I literally cannot believe, I mean, it had been sleepless months of, lots of work, lots of stress to get the product out. And as the head of marketing, everything was a big risk. Not just like creating the ads that would tell you what streaming music was. Because again, let's just rewind 10 years. Nobody understood what streaming was. It did not exist as a concept. So we were trying to teach an audience who were buying, one song for 99 cents, that they could have the entire catalog of every song ever recorded on the face of the earth at their fingertips. And the day it launched, I'm sitting at home, I have a glass of champagne in my hand because I'm like, whoo, thank the Lord, it's out in the world. And I'm watching, late night TV, and here comes Jimmy Fallon. And he's talking about Apple Music and how amazing it is. And the crazy thing is, I actually have like a picture and a video of him talking and me holding my champagne like, look, oh my God, I can't believe Fallon said it. And so this past summer when I was going through my archives and I saw that, I sent it to him and I was just like, yo, we were destined to be, you know? Because we've had this connection. But it's a beautiful thing because I do think that's the way marketing and advertising is, that it is a part of our daily culture and the things we talk about and the ways that we express ourselves. And so that bit of storytelling has always felt very natural to me.
What's the, because it hasn't come out yet, tell me a little bit about the format of the show. We saw a bunch of people in an airplane hangar.
Yeah.
Pitching Southwest. Like, you have 10 contestants.
Yes.
And where do you go from there?
Yes. So basically, I mean, it does mirror a lot of real life. You know, we have an agency with creatives, 10 creatives, who are given a brief by a brand for a problem they're trying to solve, you know, whether it is like the Southwest, you know, getting extra leg room or any number of things. And the job of the contestants and these creatives is to come up with ideas that answer the brief. Now, if you work in advertising and marketing, you know that sometimes you have a really good idea and it doesn't hit the brief exactly, but you're gonna try to shoehorn your way in there. You know what I mean? Or it's like you're gonna hit the brief in every single point, but the idea is gonna fail because it just wasn't interesting enough. And so that's really the point of the show, is that every week there are contestants who are battling to have the best creative idea of the week.
How did you find the contestants? Or how are the contestants found? Because I know that they're from all over the country.
Yes.
All different, I don't know, I think there's like a DJ, there's an entrepreneur, they're from all over.
Yes, they're from all over. And I think that's actually the beauty of the show, is that the folks who are cast on it aren't necessarily from our industry.
Right.
You know, in that there is one person who's a marketing professor, you know, but even that, it's like he's not in practice, he's in theory, right? And
I can see the producers already think like, let's see if this guy.
Exactly. Well, you'll see. But the great thing is that I actually do believe in this concept, because I believe that ideas come from a lot of different places, you know, and that especially in today's world where we all have access to our phones and to platforms where we can create content and stories, it's like, look, the idea can come from anywhere. However, does it hit the benchmarks of a brief? You know, does it hit what the company actually needs it to do and to perform? And so part of this is that, you know, it wasn't just about pitching the idea, but the ones that rose to the top, let's say the top 2 or 3, we would actually put into the world and see if they actually work.
Okay.
And then based on that, you have one grand winner.
Well, that leads me to some of the contestants, the brands. This is maybe I understand absolutely why anyone would want to sign up and try to be a contestant. I'm less clear on the brand. On some brands I can understand, but this, as someone who's been a marketer inside brands, speaking of risk, like, how did you find the brands? Was it a rush to the door to get in on this show, or was it convincing them that this is actually a good idea to participate?
Well, you know, here's what's so funny about it, is that, like, when I was CMO, I wish there had been a show like this. Well, I would have signed up so fast.
See, that says something to you about you as a CMO, though, because so many are risk averse.
That's true. However, I can't think of another platform where you're able to talk about your brand and the things that you're trying to do for a whole hour, and that is entertainment. You know what I mean? Look, we're all in this world of like product placement, and you know it. I mean, we've seen it for a long time. Look, I did it myself many, many times. You know, whether it was X Factor, we had the Pepsi can sitting on the desk, and you're hoping somebody pays attention to that blue can that's in there and goes buy something.
Yeah.
But if I'd had a whole hour where I had people talking about the brand and trying to solve some issue about it, you know, that would have been fantastic.
This is funny because I actually, for a separate story, I was talking to John Solomon. He's the CMO at Therabody, who's included in the show. And I asked him at the end of our conversation about the other thing, why did you do this? What made you want to do this? And let's see how similar it is to what you just said. He said, it's a risk, but I think you have to take risks. This is a new show, but the fact that it's with Jimmy and NBC is really getting behind it. It could be a lot of fun, and getting an entire episode about your brand is pretty much a marketer's dream.
I mean, honestly. It's like, you know, and I think some of the criticism that I've seen has been like, oh, it's gonna be like one big infomercial. And I'm like, I guarantee you it's not, you know? Because what we're really doing is the engagement of the exercise is what is fascinating. You know, I compare this to when, you know, finding a new music star shows entered, whether it was American Idol or X Factor or any one of The Voice, which is that all of us became A&Rs. All of us did. You know, you sat on your couch, you watched somebody sing, all of a sudden you knew terms like pitchy. Unless you were in a studio, nobody ever said pitchy outside of the studio.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, look, and I've had some many nights in the studio, but anyway, that's a different story. However, in this example, it is similar, you know, which is that the audience who's going to watch this, I believe, are going to be as invested as the contestants. And
we're all creative directors now?
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's, you know, I'm sorry for the marketers and advertising people out there, but that's what's gonna happen, you know? Everybody's gonna think they can do this job, you know?
Yeah.
But I also think that that's a great thing because it's not as if, you know, Idol and The Voice killed the music industry, you know? We found some stars in there. And so why can't that happen for this industry?
Well, I think that like the unspoken tension there is, you know, showing how the sausage is made in a way of with brands and advertising. And I've seen a couple screeners, and the entertainment is kind of like everyone's been in meetings, whether it's marketing or advertising or not, where it's like an ideas meeting, right? And there's no bad ideas. There are bad ideas. And
there are some.
But it's fine
ideas.
in the safety of the, you know, the comfort zone of the trust tree of the boardroom in your own office. That's not, millions of people aren't seeing that terrible idea or how you get to the good idea.
Well, William Hung didn't know people were gonna hear him sing either.
I guess he's auditioning.
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of marketers about the concept or how they define brand entertainment. This is kind of brand as entertainment. This advertising as the entertainment itself. What to you makes the advertising process the making of it, this pitch process, and that so entertaining? What's the entertainment there? What do you think is the real like kind of jewel of the show? Because to me, that's where just seeing people. I hate to say seeing people struggle is funny, but it's
it is funny.
But it is funny to see like that idea, that whole idea. That's like I said at the top. Like it looks easy. We can all see an ad and be like, that's terrible.
I know.
How did that get made? Yeah, that's the other thing. How does that get made? Well, this is showing how this gets made. So how do you think about that entertainment value of that whole process?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that again, it's like the reality of it all, you know, which is that I have been on both sides of that, where I was the person who pitched ideas. I've also been the person who judges the idea, right? And I think that's the whole stress of it all, is that you come up with an idea in some fashion. It's like, it could be spontaneous, you can think it's the most brilliant thing, and then it's like, ugh, you mess up the pitch. You know, you had that one line, you had that one idea, you're seeing the faces of people you're pitching to, and their eyes get dim or they start being distracted, and you're just like, damn it, I'm losing them. You try to pivot, and then boom, you lose the whole thing. Or it's like some little idea, and you engage people, and then it builds as you're pitching. Like, you know, it is I would say like the adrenaline of that. Yeah. Now, the next step is actually putting out into the world. You know, so let's say that your pitch has been approved and your idea is greenlit, and now you put out into the world and it flops, you know, or it becomes the biggest thing, and now you got people writing think pieces about it. You know, it's like that to me is the tension and the drama which comes along with the show, is that you get to see the sausage being made, but it doesn't feel separate from you. You know, it's like, I can't wait to see people, you know, tag us in their concepts. They're like, oh, you know, the person who won, I could have done that better, and this is my idea. You know?
Yeah. We talk about how like, oh, maybe this is where it's going. Everyone's got their phones, everyone's got their ideas. This is another example of that, you know, overused term, user-generated content in a way. Like these are the regular people pitching these ideas. How, from your experience in the rooms, not on TV, how different was the show format and the concept? How different and similar was it from the actual work?
Yeah, I would say it's very similar because, you know, especially having been a marketer and a CMO, you know, when an agency comes with ideas and it's their job to convince you of the one to buy and put a lot of money behind, it was the same process. You know, you see people who are really excited about their thing and then fumble because nerves get in their way, right? Or you realize in the moment that like, oh my gosh, I missed that one point in the brief. Or like in the moment as I'm giving feedback, whether in my real life or on this show, it was very similar where, you have to be quick with it, right? It's like I have to evaluate very quickly whether or not this is going to hit the brief and therefore should move forward. Because also the other challenge is that these are real brands that are putting real money into these ideas. This is not
theoretical.
This is not just theater. It's like an idea that is born in this show lives out in the real world. And in fact, I think this is a great experiment for us all because it is going to be real time. And so when you watch an episode and you see the product or the idea or the jingle or the ad that has been created, you will see that in the real world immediately.
We're going to see stuff about
you'll see things go live. And so you'll see the plane and the wrap and it's like, so that will be in the real world and we're all going to see how it does.
Yeah.
Because if the brands that we work with see real ROI, then we've proven a point. By the way, Jimmy didn't know any of these terms. I had to teach him a lot. Okay? And you could tell him I said it, okay? Now he knows LTO. He'll just drop it in random conversations. ROI, perfect. KPIs. He's just dropping all kind of,
Nice.
And I'm like, what does KPI mean, Jimmy? The pop quiz all the time.
Well, I'd say the balance between reality and the show, you've definitely perfected the sort of face of when something's not good, but still being like, that's nice.
Let me tell you something. This face don't play poker, baby.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out which ones you liked, but
I'm pretty immediate with my feedback.
How was you spoke about the challenge, a couple of the challenges there. I wanted to ask you about maybe more the personal challenges of translating your marketer brain to the show itself and in this format. And I can't remember if it was in the trailer, but there's a part where contestants are eliminated, and Jimmy had a hard time with that a little bit. He was like, "This is the hardest part."
Man,
and I was wondering, for you, what was the hardest part? Like, translating that experience into a format like this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the funny thing is that it's also great that Jimmy and I sort of are the yin and the yang of it. You know, in that.
Are you bad cop?
I play bad cop a lot, but only because Jimmy loves every idea. Literally, he's like a big puppy. You know what I mean? He's just like, everything's great. Yeah. And I'm like, no, that sucked. I don't know what you're talking about. And the thing, I think that, giving criticism with love is the best way to be.
Sure.
And so there were certainly, the moments where he and I are trying to figure out, okay, which idea is going forward? Because there can only be one, we can't choose everybody. And so that was definitely hard, but it is, again, something that I am used to from 25 years in this business, of having to make the tough calls. And sometimes that call, then rests on you to say, okay, this idea over that idea. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it is hard to articulate why, that it is a gut feeling or it's an instinct that drives you and says, you know what, this is gonna work and not that.
Mm-hmm. What about this, whether it's how the show worked or how it ends up playing out, what surprised you most about
oh, gosh. Well, here's the thing is that, again, ideas are not just ideas. Ideas are born of people, are born of experience. And so one of the pieces of feedback I would constantly give our creatives was that put yourself in the work. But I've said that to my teams for as long as I have been a leader in this business, which is that when you have a great idea, it really elevates and turns because you put your own personal experience into it. Mm-hmm. You put your heart into it. And so when ideas are too antiseptic, it actually doesn't work. And I realize that it is a risk because none of us want to be rejected. Yeah. Right? And so if you put yourself in the work and then somebody says that's not good, now all of a sudden you feel like you've been rejected. And that's the danger, right? Yeah. But, it's like to quote Erykah Badu, it's like, look, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm like, look, we're all sensitive about it. And so that was probably the most surprising of it, which is that there were so many good ideas that were hard to criticize or to make better because you can't be as exacting as I would in a boardroom where I'm like, not a good idea. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. got to give extra context and help so that in the next challenge, there's feedback that can be used to get to an even better idea.
What were the conversations with the ongoing throughout the show? I understand we talk about like why they would join, but throughout the show, the conversations with the marketers. I mean, they come on to the show. They're sitting there watching the pitches along with you and Jimmy. So what were your conversations with them throughout the process? And then second to that, you are a marketer, but for these specific brands, what did that kind of tell you, this experience throughout these episodes, about how they're navigating just this, the speed of culture, the speed of which they have to keep all of our attention, which comes back to the reason they're on the show in the first place. What were your conversations with the marketers like throughout this process?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, so this is a funny thing. Again, like, it was hilarious to me in the moment because I didn't mean it as an insult, but Jimmy and I were talking prior to shooting anything. And, he was like, is there anything that concerns you, about this show or about the concept? Say it now, basically, so we can fix it. And I was like, look, I am a real marketer. I have 25 years of a career. I'm in the damn Hall of Fame, okay? I'm like, you can't, I can get applause for that. I said, you know what, and this is about the industry that I love, that I'm a part of, people I care about. I was like, look, my reputation is at risk. I need this to work. And I did not say that to not a single housewife. Okay? Like when I joined the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, I didn't tell anybody my reputation was at stake, okay? But to Jimmy Fallon, I was like, look, you gotta make sure that my reputation doesn't go down. And to me, that was the center of it. So other marketers who show up, other CMOs who came on the show, that was the conversation, which is that like, I am concerned about the work that you do. This has to succeed because this isn't just about whether or not, this piece of work is like plastered everywhere on the planet. But I think even in one of the episodes, it was a CMO and the president of the company, and the president turns to the CMO and says, your job's on the line. And he wasn't kidding, you know what I mean? And so that tension of, this being, yes, entertaining and it's a TV show, but at the same time, it has real life consequences for budgets and for careers and, for reputations is important. And I do think that there is a wonderful development about being on the show as a marketer or as a brand because the world is moving even faster. I think after 2020, I don't know that there was a marketer alive who could trust a 3-year plan. It's like all of our strat plans went out the window.
And it's like, 3 months.
Look, okay, it might be 2 weeks, okay? Because the truth is that like that's when the greats were separated from the goods. It's like if you could pivot quickly, you could change based on what was happening in culture, if you were paying attention to how people are feeling and could adjust your brand to that emotion, that's who was winning. And so the marketers who are on this show are in that right now. And so utilizing this very moment in time, how do you use it to expand the business that you're working on?
Like that, like kind of walking the balance between, like you're having fun with a serious business. And well, and speaking of striking a balance, it's, you are, to your point, Hall of Famer marketer, also reality show star.
I mean, hello.
This show.
We can have it all, ladies.
This show is a perfect amalgamation of those two pursuits or personas. How did you find navigating that, or how do you think about bringing those two parts of your life together?
Well, but here's the thing, and y'all lean in a little bit to this part, okay? You already know the amount of people who had something to say when I joined the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, okay? People who were just like, why would you do this? You're ruining your career. And I can understand why they would be terrified for
risk.
me.
We go back to risk.
Go back to risk. But I have always been in the business of following my intuition and my gut. It's like whether it was the call about going forward with a campaign idea or leaving a job and getting another one, because Lord knows I've made quite a few jumps now, okay? There have always been questions about why I do what I do or the reasons why I do it. Now, I will tell you that in retrospect, it's like success has many authors, right? Everybody wants to say, oh, I knew she would always get it right. I knew she would do it. Yeah, when I left Apple to go to Uber, nobody was saying that. People were like, are you out of your mind? Why would you do that? Yeah. And the truth of the matter is that the journey that I have been on personally is not just me talking the talk, but walking the walk. That I am following my own intuition on what is going to be right for me the next step. Mm-hmm. And so when I joined the Housewives, part of it was that I knew I was done with what had been a storied corporate career.
Yeah.
And I needed something else that was going to extend my own story. And I looked at that landscape and I thought, well, why can't we explore a persona which it is not seen on TV right now? Mm-hmm. It's like, yes, there are women in their 40s and 50s who are juggling all kinds of things, relationships and children and elderly parents and relationships with each other and careers. But look, I'm a special breed, okay? It's like, look, there aren't very many of us who are 9-to-5 corporate girlies who are baddies and self-made, who get the light. And so I was like, look, I'm gonna go do that. And in so doing, it is how then a greater audience was able to see not just who I am from a personal standpoint, but also from a professional standpoint, and ultimately how Jimmy saw me anyway.
Nice. Well, listen, I look forward to seeing the rest of the show. Thanks for being here, Boz.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thanks for being here. That's all for today's episode. Brand New World is part of the Fast Company Podcast Network. Our producer is Hawa Atori. Editing by Blake Odom. Mix and sound design by Nicholas Torres. And our executive producer is Josh Christensen. See you next time.